the accident occurred during the last part of my job with the pilot, which is called the preflight. And the plane is idling, and at some point I give the pilot a signal to turn up the engine. They do the same thing commercially with airliners, but individually on a fighter plane, I stand next to the plane so the pilot can look out of the cockpit and see me standing here. The intake is up front. I'm giving him the turn-up signal to rev up to full power. On this particular day, the pilot revved up the plane at a point when I was in front of the plane. And either somebody gave him a signal to maybe pull forward another, what is called a plane director. In any event, after 6 months of doing this job with very little deviation on the procedure, because it had to do with a whole bunch of checks while the plane was at idle, I got pulled in. And I was the first person in the world to survive what we would call to be ingested into a single engine plane at full power. There's been other men pulled in partially, but the intake that I was pulled in was big enough for me, my whole body would go in. And basically they had to wait for the plane to cool off because the intake is very hot when it's been running at full power. And a bunch of time went by. They finally were able to pull me out because the heat had dissipated, laid me out on the flight deck. Flight operations were stopped because a man was basically killed. Or let's just say any accident would stop flight operations. And I was given last rites. And then he didn't want to give me last rites. He wasn't the right chaplain, but the other chaplain, the Jewish chaplain, was not available. So there he was, trying to accept the situation, which was very dramatic. And I watched him from above pull out a lavender ribbon, put it around his neck.
So what you were seeing, you were above the situation?
Yes.
So
a very common experience for
Yeah.
people that have had these, what we call NDEs, near-death experience. Yes, he was highly troubled and conflicted. And I spoke to him. I opened my eyes and actually had an exchange with him. He didn't speak. He was so stunned because I didn't have any life signs, and suddenly what he thought was a dead person is now talking to him.
So
and
did
I
you?
had no pain while I was talking to him. Zero. Other times when they had to x-ray me, they took me down to x-ray from the operating room, and 2 men, corpsmen, were x-raying me, and that was very painful. I had a whole bunch of broken bones. My whole body was like a lot of fractures.
I've heard people describe seeing a tunnel of light and that sort of thing. Did you have any of those experiences?
I would say I went into a tunnel because that's what the intake is, about 8 foot long. I did not have any experiences that were commonly described by the tunnel of light. My answer to that typically is in view of my conscious awareness that I was the light. I wasn't separate from the light. I was the light shining on the priest, shining on the operating table, watching about 8 medical people trying to revive me. That's how I answered it, because no, I did not see an external light that I was moving.
So your soul, let's say, was above the situation, your body and the
Yes.
chaplain,
Yes.
and then it return to your body?
a number of times.
Okay. Now, when you did speak and they saw that you were still alive, what was their reaction?
Well, when they first took me down, I had no life signs, but the Catholic priest told them that I had spoken to him. On the basis of that, they continued to try to revive me, and they couldn't. So they called him back a second time, and he gave me last rites a second time. But after that, somehow I came back into my body, and they more or less revived me. You know, it's a tricky thing to talk about, because on one level, a physical level, we would say, well, they revived me because they did certain procedures that are pretty standard. But on another level, if I didn't want to come back into my body, I wouldn't have.
Has that experience changed your life?
Dramatically.
Can you describe that?
It depends on my mood in the moment. The perspective that I have on what we call three-dimensional reality and the human experience, birth, events and drama and death, is like a lucid dream. In my own way of trying to address it, I would say that it has parallels to the imagination. You could be sitting doing anything and imagine anything else other than where you're at. You can project yourself at your childhood home, a vacation spot, an event in other words, you have the facility to experience something that is not happening in the present moment. But at the same time, and I use that word loosely, at the same time, you are having a present moment of experience. So we have this experience all the time, but because of the way we're raised and the influences in our culture, we don't think about that sort of thing, that the imagination is something that is way beyond. You have to have a body to have an imagination within the cultural medical model. Okay. I mean, most of my life I'm doing ordinary things, worried about certain things. I have health issues, blah, blah, blah. I didn't get exempt from certain human experiences. You know, I've had 2 divorces, I've got 5 grandchildren, and, you know, a lot of drama. The near-death experience is always there. It's always speaking to me without let up.